Marketing Live, show number 395. I am your host, Lauren Gray. Thank you for joining us live. And for those of us that are watching us on the replay, thank you for doing that as well. If you're catching us on our standard Wednesday, 11:30 a.m. Australian, good day. If you're catching us at our 11:30 a.m. London time, Roy. No, that's not even the right language. Anyways, so much for me, and even the English accents doesn't even work for me. But thank you everyone for watching us, no matter what time you are. And of course, if you're just listening to us, you're probably avoiding my happy face and the terrible background. We actually have our construction done from the damage done from the hurricane. It's now about rebuilding our offices cosmetically. So we're at that point now where we're putting things together. Still have all my little badges from all the places I spoke at, and tchotchkes that are still very dusty from the drywall, but still all the same there. Only logo stuff is microphone and me. But anyways, let's get to our topic today. As always, try to be timely about what's going on with this week. There's a massive accelerant going on, obviously, with AI, ChatGPT in particular, its usabilities. Software is scrambling to use the API interface to integrate them into the services and profiles they're doing. We've had extensive conversations actually over the past few months, because there was a lot of early adoption of platforms that were doing SEO optimization, content generation, research for reporting, and the AIs were an accelerant to their algorithmic functions that were there. So we've been talking about the use of AI in tools for quite a while. But now, with it being in such the public mainstream of people getting to actually work with things like ChatGPT, Bing putting it into theirs, already seeing the limitations necessary, the restrictions necessary because of people learning quickly how to ask the questions that create the responses and so forth. We're seeing it controlled and contrived. And I think out of most general discussions, we realize that we're always used to getting things for free. Google, Bing, things like this, where, hey, use it and give it. Okay, and we'll be able to continue to give you these services. Well, over the course of the years, we've slowly begun to constrict our willingness to share personal data, which is constricting the revenue stream of using that data for marketing purposes. So we're going to be interesting in a place potentially in the future where we're going to see things where, yes, you can use it to a level. For those of you who use software, the trial period. But if you're really going to want to use the full scope or spectrums of scope of the services we're offering, it's going to be a paid for function. So we're actually going to have to pick a side potentially as to what we decide to use in the future tense for things that we want, if we're not willing to surrender our personal data to be used for marketing purposes. Which brings us to our topic. That's why I was bringing that up. And we're going to go kind of rewind the time machine a little bit. Our topic today, is it live or is it Memorex? The changing landscape of content authenticity. Yes, I'm showing my age, but I can do that quite regularly with the graying that's going on both sides, whatever. Anyways, for those that are old enough to remember, Memorex was it still is, a manufacturer of tape that in their advertising history came up with campaigns, ads on TV and so forth, that was touting its clarity of recording back when tape was used for recording. And they were very proud of the fact that through the recording process, their tape was hard to determine whether it was actually a live performance that you would hear, or whether it was a recording from Memorex that was played back. It kind of harkens back to something even older, which, dare I say, was before me, but not around. It was probably around Robert Cole time. Just kidding, picking on Robert Cole. And that was the RCA. There was a little dog that was in front of a record player with a huge megaphone cone on it, and the slogan for them for years, for decades, really was, "He hears his master's voice," and that was a way of them advertising that the record creation capability that they had, their recordings, were so good that it would fool the trained ear that they were hearing the actual voice or original sound. Why I bring all this historical conversation to our problems with is because we're now in a world where, with AI and ChatGPT being the most pinnacle of this at this point, we're going to be dealing with some interesting changes in our, as I like to say, paradigm, but it's actually paradigm of content. We're going to appreciate, in many ways, the expansion of content generation because of people's utilization of ChatGPT. Give it a direction, give it a context, and it'll run with you and write that book for you that you never got to as in your life. Saying, "I'll write a book about this." It will be very expansive in its wording of things, where writer's block is no longer even a term. Matter of fact, probably years from now, there people were wondering what you're talking about. It's like, what was that? Because of the content conversational chat function of AI that ChatGPT represents, is going to replace the what am I going to write about? I got to research this or I do this. But in exchange for that, we're going to get flooded with a lot of content that we have to decide, is it real or is it Memorex, metaphorically? Is it something from a person, legitimately? Was it moderated by a person, legitimately? Or was it just let loose to run on its own and create the content based on a direction, purpose, or automation? And we're going to see a lot of content for content's sake. We know historically, we've always been trying to struggle with optimizing our content on the internet so that it shows at the top of the results the SERP page represents for the context of what was being searched for. And we know that Google has always been close to the chest about what they've done to figure that out, to make it the most applicable results possible. And we, as a marketing group, as programmers, as SEO specialists, whatever context of title you want, have always tried to guess, second guess, and third guess. You hear, people that have been in the business for a while, the good old days where you could just write a word repetitively in your content and that would modify your ranking for that word because of the frequency of the use of the word. Well, that was quickly dismissed. And even before that was the subversive way of writing a lot of text in the same color background that you had of your website, so that even though the user didn't see the constant repetitiveness of the word and wonder why you kept using it over and over, it was very prominent in the text of the website itself, also spoofing the search engines. And, that's often referred to as the good old days. Well, okay. Since then, a lot of things have changed as to how Google creates authenticity, and AI has been a strong part of that. Google has been using their AI functionality in search engine results for now a couple of years, and they don't really disclose how much is being used for what. They hint at times percentages and so forth, but it has been an integral part of improving the results of their search pages. I know 2 shows ago we talked about that Google blinked, and that was the surgence of interest in ChatGPT, and Google didn't have it yet. Bing seemed to be getting it, and then Google false stepped on their launching of what they talked about, the Lambda program, and it first right out of the gate, nobody did a accuracy check on it, and it inappropriately said that the Webb telescope found the first exoplanet, and that's not true. And so that was a stumble point, which goes to a conversation we've had many times about the politics of discussions. You only have to create a seed of doubt for the entire context to be put into doubt, and that's literally what happened. Google is now not trying to keep pace. They're going to try to outleap what's being done with ChatGPT. So they're not just going to say, hey, we got that too, but rather, hold my beer, let me come out when I'm ready to really just dominate what the actual usability that Bing is testing it comes out to be. And we can equate to that in our own industry. Hilton has historically always been, this goes back several years, notoriously good about advancing technologies. But then because they were first to market and they didn't necessarily have the whole thing in concept working correctly, they were launching it to be first, not launching it to be successful always, that they would stumble over themselves. And Marriott was always the slow and plodding turtle to their tortoise and hare story. And they would see what Hilton tried to do. Maybe they were even working on something similar, saw the fall of the flaws that created it to fall apart, and then corrected for those and realigned them. And if there was still merit and value to the program, launched their version of what Hilton tried to launch earlier on that didn't quite succeed. I say that from knowing people many years ago that were summarily dumped out of a project simply because the project was shut off. So for that reason, we have the examples of false steps and early adoption. And gosh knows, as an early adopter, bleeding edge person, I am constantly, there is bones of several apps and programs that I've attempted and tried and used and failed. The old adage goes, you learn from your failures, but then I am a freaking physicist, because that is a constant program of discovery, trial, and error. But with that, we as a society are trying to now cope with this infusion into our culture. This, I can make content of anything. I can make an image of anything. And the only limitation of things like images, like Da Vinci and so forth, and a host of others that are just mushrooming out right now, is that there's still a hint of that doesn't look real. And I can assure you, in the iterations of new computers to come and new programming to come, that will turn harder and harder to find. There's been numerous news articles about students, what's the potential of them to cheat? Obviously ChatGPT shown its success similar to computers earlier on about chess, where it finally beat a chess master. Computers are smarter. Yes, from a strategic point of view of chess, computers can learn all there is to learn about the moves and mobilities of a chessboard, and they can beat humans even in their unpredictability because there's a pattern of success to it. But now there's things in the news where you have students that can write full dissertation answers and theses and everything else that they themselves didn't write. And because of it pulling from so many different sources and so forth, the first concern was, can we even catch these things? And now there's already software to beat software to say this was fully an AI content generation, because there's patterns of how it gathers data, how it accumulates data. The literal word by word writing of itself is a pattern into itself. That's only going to change and get better. Similar to the old style stories we talked about of websites and SERP jumping of, and I just mentioned of, white letters on a white background or repetitive usage of words and stuff. We're in that progression of augmentation and refinement as these things become more and more a part of what we're doing. I use a plugin for Google Chrome to see, in contrast, how Google gives results compared to this plugin called Merlin, where it will give you the same, it will give you an answer to what you ask in the search bar. And it's fascinating because it begins to actually add to or create alternative concepts to your question. We don't always ask the best questions of search engine results. We often stumble through the process. The autofill was a huge help for myself, I know, where I would go over and start asking a question, and I would see from the autofill that there was a better way of asking that question. And I say, oh no, pick that one. That's better than what I was rambling on 15 words. That's 7 words. And, it probably has a better answer result. We're going to see that, I think, in combination with ChatGPT or usages thereof of it, where the conversational component, the chat component of these AIs interfaces, and this is just a transitional engagement with them. Okay. As we talked about in the show, 389, I think it was, we talked about that this is a transitional point of AI. This ask a question, get an answer is the first phase of ask a question gets asked back for clarification is given, ultimate results may be given back. An engagement of the AI, the typical HAL computer out of 2001: Space Odyssey, or the computer out of Star Trek, where it's an active conversation. You're asking a question and clarification sometimes happens and or an answer is given. So we're in this transitional point for it, but it's still a shiny new object, still being implemented into so many things. And like I said, from a content, the libraries at Memorex, we are now faced with the dilemma that we're going to be seeing a tremendous amount of content. Valuable content doesn't mean what's being written is not valuable, but the merit of the content is going to have a whole new tier of perspective that we've never had to face before. Never before this time have we said who wrote that and meant that it wasn't a person. It's always been a person. It might have been, plagiarized, where this was written from this person, aggregated Frankenstein-wise to this person, augmented by this person, and was Frankenstein together. But it was always about a person having written it. But as so many people have explored with ChatGPT and so forth, it can write poems and sonnets and storylines and movie scripts and TV show scripts and song titles, song lyrics. It can do all of those things, sometimes in a very humorous way. But we have to understand that we now have to look at the content beyond just it being what it says to the source of where it came from, which then raises into question the truth and authenticity. As again, persistent as I am about this statement, truth and authenticity is not a component of current data supplied to these AI functions. Data is the source of it. And we've already seen from examples of people playing with the way they ask questions and structure questions and so forth, that there is built-in bias to the data that is presented to these programs. inherently, because the creators of the data that's being given to these have bias, gender bias, geographic bias, ethnic bias, uh, preference bias, educational bias. All of these things influence as to what words are used, the context of the words that are being used, the context of the data that's being referred to, the value of the highlights of the data that's being provided, all of that. And then, regardless of the inspirational data that's being given to the AI programs, is the historical data that it's pulling from, the books, the magazines, the literature, the articles, everything else are written by humans who are innately biased. So it will have a twist to it. It is not going to be the fully factual truth and authenticity base of it. It can say this is the truth from the source that I got from, and it is an accurate statement. But the data itself isn't necessarily a truthful source of data. It reflects a perspective, which brings us to other aspects of the content that we have to begin to look at. And the content being generation for content's sake, which we're going to see a tsunami of. We're already seeing it. It's only going to get larger. Other things about content that we have to look at is content from a point of opinion. AI is not about opinion. AI is about answering to the query that has been presented. It is a statement from perspective. It is not an opinion. Humans retain opinion. But with that being said, AI can emulate opinion in its response to the query. So we're going to have to decide when we look at content in whatever form it has, because right now it's just textual content. Very quickly, it'll be audio content. Very much after that, it'll be visual content. It is a natural progression, just like we went through text ads, image ads, video ads, okay, or websites, text ads, images and text, video and text, because of the bandwidth usage necessary for it. Same too with AI. From a computer horsepower perspective, the only limiting factor of not using images more than they can help with, not using video more than they can help with, is the limitations of the bandwidth of the actual hardware to generate the responses that's being solicited. We're going to see that change as quickly as we saw it change, if not quicker than we saw it change in the history of our website, internet action, and activities, because we have a large base of bandwidth to build this on. And you start getting into quantum computing, and now you're dealing with a whole nother level of capabilities that will actually make it easier and faster for this. So with all of that in mind, opinion will begin to blur. Is it the opinion as solicited by the result of the query? Or is it actually a personal opinion from a person that has individual perspective? Which brings us to our next point of content from a perspective. AI's perspective does not echo the sources of its data. It echoes the source of the answer to the query. You can have multiple sources of data, and it'll reflect only the value of the response best given. So if it quotes Shakespeare, it could emulate Shakespeare if you ask it to. But if it takes from Shakespeare and takes from Emerson, you'll see the context because it'll have that nuance to it. But it doesn't have the perspective of the individual scholar, writer. It has the content necessary to satisfy the query that it's been presented with. So the uniqueness of perspective, the content from a perspective, will become a cherished aspect. We'll actually begin to magnate towards individual content, errored as it is, fraught with ramblings like mine, bad punctuation like mine, spherical nonlinear discussion like mine. We're going to think that it has a different value merit than the linear, progressive, organized, structurally correct AI content. That variation will become a distinction that will become more important in time. The other content perspectives to consider is content from an authoritative perspective. This one is very blurry because, in all honesty, this is where AI programs, chat programs, can excel because they draw upon so many resources that their validation of the opinion, the content that they're creating is solid. As it's already been pointed out in the early adoptions of it, ChatGPT was able to pass law bar exams and so forth because from a function and structural point of view, it has the full resource of all the legal entities that it can be tapped to, and it can answer the questions because it has literally open book answers. It knows all of the data that would be necessary to create, to make the correct answer to the question. The questions that it didn't do well on, it didn't score 100%, are the ones that are subjective, interpretive. That the law doesn't have a clear black or white variation to it. There are nuances in between, and therefore there is lack of confidence perspectives, mathematically speaking, so that it can choose wrong, even though it thought it was right. It doesn't try to be a wrong answer. It only tries to give the best answer. That authoritative perspective, they will continue to improve upon. And it's going to prove to be a bit of a problem. If I was on stage adamant about an opinion that I had and perspective that I felt was solid from my usage, the usual challenges would be, well, how much of it have you done? How large of a scope of doing what you say your opinion have you done? And how valid has that opinion come from all of those experiences? That creates an authoritative perspective. If I'm talking about running a 1,000-room hotel, I better have run a 1,000-room hotel. If I'm talking about running several campaigns over a variety of brands and had these successes, these failures, these insights, and whatever, then I should have had the actual practical. I had done that, not just from a third party. If I would have, this is what I would have done, but the actual practical experience. That gives me the authoritative position. With AI, it can draw on mine and everybody else's experiences of shared opinion and create an authoritative perspective. Again, it's a matter of confidence. It doesn't mean it's completely right, but from a confidence perspective, and maybe back up a little bit when we're talking about math and statistics and confidence, is when you're dealing with probabilities and trends and data, everything's not 100%. Matter of fact, very few things are 100%. Things are on a scale of confidence factors. Based on all the data that you're accumulating for the decision you're looking for, there's a confidence factor that can come out of it that based on all the data you've given, based on all the variable interactions of that data, there is a confidence factor percentage that says that most likely this is the answer you're looking for. Now, me personally, when I do math like that for those reasons, anything above an 85% gathers my attention. It's kind of like equating to the weather people say it's going to be cloudy. There's going to be chances of rain, 60% chance of rain. And somebody says, well, they were wrong. It didn't rain on me. Right. Because they were saying that out of everybody that they're talking about in the space that they're measuring, okay, that 60% of the people will get rain. You just, on a statistical side of things, weren't part of that percentage that did. That's a lame excuse of confidence factors, but it's an idea of showing you that it did do what they said it was going to do, and it did do it in the context of what they said it was going to do, but it didn't mean that it actually was applicable to you, that it did it that way. So confidence factors, 85% means that there's a likelihood that this is the answer. Anything above 90%, it's probably the answer. Above 95%, it's the answer. Minus unforeseen circumstances or variables that were not put into the data, a 95% or better means that that is most likely the answer you're looking for, that this is most likely the result that will happen. AI deals with that as well. It deals with confidence factors of what is the next thing, next word, next phrasing, next piece of data source that I need to include, factor into that process. It's a matter of involved confidences. Through that, it can create an amazing authoritative perspective. So much so that you have me on the stage, as I said, talking about my opinion and my perspective, and you have the check telling you that it's different, okay? It'll be hard pressed, kind of like a legal case. You know, you go and raise your hand in the audience and say, well, I disagree. And ChatGPT says that that is not truly what probably will happen, that it's most likely this, this, and this. And my data might be a part of what was used in ChatGPT. And now it's a matter of authoritative perspective. It's not that ChatGPT's authoritative perspective may be incorrect. It may be that the unique nuance of my personal perspective and opinion is based on everything that also was variables that were not accounted for that led to my perspective. The team that I had, the building and the location, the unique factors of the geographies, whatever, that weren't accounted for in my general authoritative perspective. So for that reason, we might begin to lean too heavily on AI content from the fact that it aggregates so much data that the statistical accuracy of it might be better than a single source accuracy. And I worry about that because, again, it's not based on truth and authenticity. It's based on data, relation data, and confidences. So with that, personal opinion and personal authoritative perspectives are a matter of preference and choice. It kind of goes back to, how do you pick your friends? It's not by a factor of functions, it's a feeling and interaction. It's the intangibles, the word that we're probably going to use more and more as time goes on. It's the unaccounted for variables that are not put into the cumulative data that's used to have an AI result. That humanistic quality, that gut feeling aspects of things. Now, for me to sit here and say that you're going to make professional business decision based on gut feelings, I would say with a huge grain of salt, maybe a pound or bag or two of it, that it's based into the suspicious creation of it. That let me dig a little farther into why I don't feel good about this answer, why I don't want to think that this is the solution. What is it that's holding me back or making me feel funny about this? That's the humanistic aspect that we have to maintain. The why component to the content. That authoritative content will be presented to us in deluge of things to come, and well-written content that we have to take the time to really dissect it to realize that it's based on a premise that doesn't exist. Because you may think that ChatGPT or other AIs are accumulating this huge funnel of data, but it's the function of AI that is the dangerous part, because I can take an AI function and say, only my data do I want used in this tool. And you would walk into it saying, oh, that's AI, yeah. And you would assume, make the assumptions that it's like every other AI that pulls in the universe of data. And it's not. It's Lauren's data that's being used. And you might take an opinion from the AI that you would have taken from me. And I say this from an old commercial for FedEx, and I still use this as an example to this day. It was funny as heck. It was during Super Bowl. It goes back a few years. So the commercial is that everybody's rallied into the meeting room and pre-crowded, and the boss is like, all right, guys, we got to save money. I need some ideas. And the mailroom boy, lowest on the political totem pole in the room, goes, hey, we could use FedEx and save, blah, blah, blah percentage. Then the chief marketing officer is sitting at the table, good looking guy, perfectly dressed, goes and says, wait a minute, everybody. And everybody stops. He says, I have an idea. And he's using his hand gestures, we could use FedEx and save such and such percentage. Everyone's like, oh, that's a great idea. That's wonderful. That's brilliant. You're brilliant. And the mailroom guy looks at the marketing guy saying, I just said that. And the marketing guy says, yeah, but you didn't do this. And he shows his little hand gestures. And it's true. Sometimes you'll listen to the opinion of a third party and you'll ignore the advice of the people that you keep close to you. I see it constantly as a objective, unbiased auditing platform. I walk in, I'm here to help and clarify. I've been asked to go over and do an audit. What's your current place in market? What's your current services being offered by your agency in relationship to others? What's your competitive set? Whatever it may be. And I can, one of the things that's an asset is that you're sitting in the room in the presentation, and this agency, their agency, it's not that they're not being trusted. It's not that they're not going to be there. It's not that they're comparing whether you should do it instead of them. You're not there for that purpose. But you can hear, I leave to listen to the agency, their angst that they have presented the same thing I just presented, but I was listened to and they weren't, because their voice is a familiar voice. And sometimes things get lost in the white noise of being familiar. And sometimes it just took an outside third party. So some of the best political engagements and those conversations is to listen to what the agency's perspective is, the angst of the agency, the challenges they have, the things that are stuck in the mud, the things that haven't been moved forward, the things that are languishing in decision-making, and looking at them, and then taking that information and putting it over your discoveries as the person that's doing the auditing, and say, they're right. This is things that need to get done. These things should be corrected the way, so forth. And make it so that as you're telling the C-level or the people that brought you in to do the auditing, that these are things to consider, make the credit value due to the agency. I think this has been pointed out to you by your agency, that this was a function. I completely and wholeheartedly endorse that this is a number one priority forced ranking issue that you need to solve, kind of thing. And you not only get a friend, but you get an ally in the sense that then all the things that they didn't think about that you came into, they're willing to take on, saying, hey, if he's right about us and so forth. And they are then open to not just the criticism, but just it's not criticism, it's the evaluation, that it's easier to take a bitter pill with a sugar pill before it. That, we're willing to, rather than be defensive, arms crossed, and say, okay, auditor. That's a whole big pain in our butt. We got to do this, this, and this. Give them access to stuff. You got to be told what we're doing wrong. Rah, rah, rah. Instead, now they're embracing it like these guys are good. They're really truly doing what they say they're going to do. They're endorsing what we know we need to get done. Now, bad agencies don't like us because we really are pointing out the stuff, and then they try to cover it up. And that's the worst thing to do when you're going through an audit process, because I'm going to tell you it's the worst thing to do, because I'm there to be honest. I'm not there to displace them or anything else. I'm there to fulfill the request of a perspective about evaluating everything that's going on the inside. So with that, going back to AI discussion, the idea of contrast, of taking the authoritative perspective, the opinion perspectives, and recognizing the variations of its source, personal or generated, okay, and how influenced was the generated source, to what was the medium. I think we're going to have ourselves asking a lot of questions. What data sources were used in that evaluation perspective? What data was functioned in those responses? I think those will come up in questions. Obviously, the chat GPTs and so forth of the world are considered omni, that they're tapping and touching everything that's possible. Google, imagine doing the same thing. But you're going to find a lot of variation versions that are more centric to a particular business model or function that are going to have limited data pull. They might tap into the GPT aspect and so forth from a functional point of view, but the data that they're adding to the results that are given could be skewed more to what they're providing than what's being used by the external sources of ChatGPT. Keep that in mind. These are all things that are happening right now. These are things that we didn't have these discussions 8 months ago. 8 months ago. They started happening about 6 months ago in some context with people that were playing with beta, with chat, and messing around with, how cute and cutesy is that, and how fun is that to create, and so forth and so on. But now it's turned into such an accelerated snowball down the hill. It's a freaking mountain rolling down. The other things to talk about for content is personal opinion versus professional. I think you're going to begin to appreciate, once again, the value of people's personal opinion. And I mean this from the perspective that right now we're in a polarized society. If you disagree with me about anything, then you disagree with me about everything. It's terrible to say, but it's true. The same people you go to the grocery store buying the same groceries from, you would despise being in a discussion with, because they seem to be on the other side of a spectrum. And because they disagree with you on one thing, you say that they're completely wrong on everything. And it's not true. You're just disagreeing on one thing or connected things. So the idea of a personal opinion, this might help us. It might make us appreciate the fact that we're so flooded with the content that's being generated with this new tool, this new functionality, this new perspective addition, that having human engagement and sharing personal opinion rather than shying away from it, like, I don't really want to talk about things that they can disagree with, because then that will close the door on everything. That's usually the result. Once you find out you disagree on something, then there's no willingness to discuss anything. Maybe this will open that door again. Maybe this will be an option for us to say, you know what? I know we disagree on these things, but you're still a living, breathing human, and I'd much rather talk to you than read a novel written by an AI because I asked a question. The other will be kind of leading into the same concept of that is preference of source. You're going to begin to get faced with the fact that there's going to be books that are written by AI. There already are books that are being written by AI. They're already on the bestseller list. And you're going to enjoy them for what they are, and you're going to really read them for the novelty of the fact that it was written by someone that wasn't really human. But that novelty is going to wear off as the familiarity begins to spread. And you're going to start seeking out real context, real opinion, biased opinion, pure, unadulterated. I want to hear what you have to say, whether I agree with it or not, because it's your individual human opinion. It's going to have a whole new value proposition, that preference of source. If I need functional data and so forth, absolutely. I want to get the best comprehensive, conclusive, aggregate data possible. That world doesn't change. But if I'm looking for the how abouts and what's if we were to dream, what would you think would be this? What would you think would be that? And not because I asked an AI bot to tell me what is the best solution, but to talk to somebody and hear from their unique perspective what they think their solution is. I think that that's going to be an interesting twist. Another thing I want to throw into the mix of all this conversation is we've had an oversaturation in years past, especially due to the COVID lockdown, of webinars, seminars, remote gatherings, and we were dulled to it. We were just like, oh my gosh, talking heads, talking faces. A lot of platforms, I use them, try to emulate the virtual conference, the engagement capability, the hallway chat stuff, the vendor chat stuff, and it had modicum levels of success. And I still think it's valuable. I think the hybrid conferences are still very much a thing that should be relished. I think it's going to go into the VR world a little bit more as that technology becomes more mainstream for people and less of a novelty. But I think that's all great. But now, as we go through this tsunami of generated content, I think that we are going to get to a place that we're going to enjoy human interaction more. We're going to look forward to going to the conferences because we get to actually stand in front of another human and have a dialogue about something and know that it's coming from that human and not from a generated source. I think we're going to enjoy watching somebody on stage talk about what they think, to include it into how, whether we think that way or disagree with that way, but at least give us a contrast as to how we think versus someone else. I think we're going to enjoy that. Even though we could go ask the same question or take the same content and go to AI and decide that we'll accept that answer. Again, from an aggregate content, tell me what I need to know world, AI is going to be a wonderful, valuable tool. From a, hey, let's sit and talk and hash back and forth concepts, opinions, preferences, authoritative perspectives, and what have you, the human touch will be a high value. And I think in a strange way, this is going to improve the desire to go to conferences. I know we already had the desire to go to conferences post-COVID lockdown, like, wow, living, breathing people in the same room, that's ebbing just as much as our travel cycle of revenge travel has ebbed. And we're more into the realities of what is the functional travel, the costs of travel, the frustrations of travel, all that reality sinks back in rather than just I'll do whatever it takes to get out of my house mentality. All those things are progression. I think we're in this progression for AI content as well, that we'll enjoy the content that's derived from AI, albeit that we might get a little saturated for it for quite a while. We'll see the transition of its interactivity with us from a text only to a voice potential, the next thing, and then visualization thereafter. The creation component of it, the convenience of it, the shortcuttings of it, the bandwidth improvement of it, the strange replacement of people's jobs from it, the functionalities of what people are doing. I was just talking to a friend of ours that has developed an amazing tool that will help with dialoguing about review responses. As small as it sounds, is a time vacuum for a lot of people. And they want it to be original and creative and unique to each of their responses. They don't want it to be a cookie cut, paste, that somebody can look and say, that's exactly the same thing you said 10 times over before, good or bad. But the uniqueness of individual responses, curated by a human, great time saver. That's going to be, I think, a wicked tool that gets into the market. Same too with other things, SEO and value propositions. I'm already working with tools that are using AI that you give them context and examples and goals, and it will create amazing optimized content. And then you go in and create the nuance of your voice. Okay, it was written for you, but it was not written by you. Big difference to remember. And for that reason, you need to make it yours. Or in the world of Back to the Future, I need time to erase your name on it and put my name on it so I can turn them in as my homework. Same kind of thing. You need to make it your voice. Just because AI can write content for you in social media doesn't mean you want it to, because your voice, your demeanor of dialogue, first person, narrative, third person, authoritative, whatever it is, has to be consistent. And it's not that AI might get the gist of it over time. The more you ask it and the more it will become closer to what you respond as, of course. But the reality of it is it should always be mitigated by a human to make sure the consistency is there, the message is correct, and that it should have been said with the convenience and not having to rethink or pre-think the creation from zero. That's the value of what AI can create for content, is that as well. So with that, I think really I don't want to be repetitive over all of these things when it comes to content for AI. I just wanted to kind of put it into the context of something we've already lived through in different ways. Is alive or is a Memorex is actually an echo to before with the RCA gramophones, listening to his master's voice. And now we're into the world of, is it live or is it ChatGPT? We're looking at the new context of, is this a creation from a human or is this a creation from what humans have created? So for that reason, we're into that new world. So that is my dissertation on chat content for today. Of course, the show notes, the bullet points I talked about, will be in the show notes. For those of you watching on TV, thank you so very much. Roku, Google, Amazon, Apple. Our TV show TV is on Hospitality Channel, TV channel. You can get it if you don't already have it. Just go on your Roku or your smart TV, look for Hospitality Channel, add the channel. The show is always on the free side. There is a pay gateway for other cool content on the back side of it, but pay from a free side, the show is always there along with software and services. You'll see that as well. If you're watching, or excuse me, watching and listening to us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or YouTube, or Twitch, thank you. We're on multiple pages and channels on all those platforms. Say versus LinkedIn. LinkedIn is only one, which is us, me, really. That one is a limitation of the platform for it. We have it on Twitch for those that use gaming consoles for their content, which is not a bad thing. They're just as good as a TV box these days for most, or a smart TV. They have all the functionalities of having all of the channels on them as well. So we're on Twitch as well for those that use Twitch on their Game Boys. And of course, we're an app, iOS and Android. You can look for the Hospitality Channel. Show is always there as well. For those of you that are in the industry and do what I do, which is hospitality marketing, we do have a hospitality marketing club. It's a peer level club. This is not a teach people beginners level. This is people that are doing the industry and need a peer group to discuss functionalities. It's a nice neutral place to dialogue about advanced questions, intermediate questions, journeyman questions, how-to lessons. We have live question and answer periods. We have great presentations in it. It's a fun, eclectic in lots of ways group that has some great dialogue, and we welcome you to join. There is a bit of a quiz to get in. You just go to hospitalitymarketing.club. You see a little email box there. Put your email in it. I send you a 10-question quiz. If you get 90% right, I will send you an invite to join us. There's no charge for it right now. I think over time, as we cultivate the community and look at the value proposition and get the feedback from everybody, those that will be legacied in, get legacied in, and those coming in afterwards will probably then be a paid model at that point, I think, if the value and the merit of the platform is there, which it has been for several months now. So we'll see how all that goes. So for, again, all of those that watch us or listen to us, 11:30 a.m. Sydney time, Australia for our APAC followers, and for those that listen to us, 11:30 a.m. London time for our EU and Mideast market. Thank you so very much. Catch us both of those times. Always, we have a audio podcast that we've also been doing. That one actually for 17 years, but the live show here and the podcast weekly has been for the past, we're in our 9th year. We've been doing it every week, never missed a week for all these 9 years. But our podcast is available on 39 platforms. Just look for the Hospitality Marketing Podcast if you want to play it on iTunes or anything. It's all audio. It's a much briefer show. It's no more than 30 minutes, usually 20 to 30 minutes. We recap the show a little bit. We really dive into the tools that we keep talking about here as well, and the techniques of using those tools every week. So it's a little bit more of a granular discussion about functionalities of tools and usabilities of tools. Plus, again, like I said, the recap of the show. So with all of that, my name is Lauren Gray. I thank you for the privilege of your time, and I look forward to talking to you next week. So take care.